This video is brought to you by patreon.com/worsttake. Get access to exclusive live streams and Discord servers, on-screen shoutouts, and early access to some videos when you join now. Help make sure that we can continue to make content like this by supporting the Patreon. Links are in the description down below. Let's talk about the Browns' offensive line and what are the actual problems with the Browns offensive line. Because usually when I hear people talk about the Browns offensive line, it's pretty general, right? They're like, oh, the line stinks. It's not really anything specific. We're not talking about any specific players other than like Jed Wills, who hasn't really played in a little while. We're not really talking about pass blocking versus run blocking. So I want to get more specific in this conversation and really talk about what the problems actually are for the Browns offensive line. Because unfortunately, the conversation with the Browns offensive line has gotten tied into arguments about Deshaun Watson's ineffectiveness and why it happened, right? A big argument for Deshaun Watson, pushed by like Mary Kay Cabot, is that Watson struggled because the offensive line was bad. I would make the argument that there is significantly more evidence that the offensive line struggled to pass block specifically, not run block, but pass block specifically because of Deshaun Watson. Why is it that I think that? Why do I think there's so much evidence that has that as the case? Well, one, we've looked at the film. If you watch that film, you can see Deshaun Watson multiple times creates his own pressures, does things that does not help his tackles. We've seen the difference when Jameis gets in there, but there's also stats that we could throw for those people who need those stats. Let's look at pass blocking efficiency. Pass block efficiency is a stat that measures the pressures allowed per snap. So how many pressures did you allow per snap? With Watson in, the Browns had a 80 pass block efficiency. That's the 29th ranked pass blocking efficiency in the NFL. They gave up 107 pressures. That's a 34.6 pressure percentage with Deshaun Watson in there. So they were really bad pass blocking, or at least the pressure numbers were really bad pass blocking when Deshaun Watson was in there. What about the 2 weeks when Jameis Winston was in there? Now, it is also worth noting that the 7 weeks of Deshaun Watson is measured against the Dallas Cowboys, who have a decent defense this year, the Jacksonville Jaguars, who have proven to be a bad defense this year, the New York Giants, who have proven to be a decent defense this year, and the Raiders, the Commanders, the Eagles, and the Cincinnati Bengals. Jameis Winston's 2 starts that we're going to measure these stats against are against the Baltimore Ravens, who, look, their defense is not the greatest this year, but they're still top 5 in sacks in the NFL right now. And they're a team that looks poised to come out the AFC, in the Los Angeles Chargers, who, again, really good team, looks like they're poised to come out the AFC, and also top 5 in sacks. So that is what the difference in the sample is. And even with that considered, the pass blocking efficiency for Jameis Winston the last 2 weeks has jumped significantly from 80 with Deshaun Watson, which was 29th ranked, to 88 with Jameis Winston the last 2 weeks, which ranks 11th in the NFL. You went from the bottom of the league to almost in the top 10. All you did was swap out the quarterbacks. And you did that while playing 2 of the better teams in the AFC. The pressure percentage went from 34.6 to 20. It's a difference of 14.6 points. It is an undeniable fact that Deshaun Watson made the offensive line, when it comes to pass blocking, worse. I know there are some people who, whenever I talk about bringing in a new quarterback, they automatically default to, well, we can't bring in anybody. The offensive line is terrible. Deshaun Watson looked like that. Any quarterback would look like that with this offensive line because they're terrible at pass blocking. They're not terrible at pass blocking. Deshaun Watson was just terrible at football this year. The numbers bear it out. The tape bears it out. My man was just bad this year. And the next time we'll see him, he'll be recovering from a torn Achilles. So, yeah, you should draft the quarterback. Doesn't mean you ignore the offensive line, but, dude, you should do something with the quarterback position this offseason because I don't think Deshaun Watson's going to be your answer, and I'm not confident that DTR is going to be anything better than what Deshaun Watson can offer post-Achilles injury. So that is one thing that needs to be said. The offensive line, when it comes to pass blocking, is not that terrible. Joe Bitonio, DeJuan Jones, Jack Conklin, Ethan Pocic, Wyatt Teller, they all hold up fine in pass blocking. They're not like a dominant offensive line. They're not top 10. They're barely above average there, but they're not going to get somebody killed as a pass blocking unit. Where they have, unfortunately, made the turn to mediocre is where this team has made its bread and butter. And this is an area in which they were mediocre with Bill Callahan last year. It's an area where they're mediocre in this year. I talked about it on my film breakdown last week. Run blocking is the Browns' big issue with this offensive line. And here's the difficult part about rebuilding this offensive line. They're still fine as pass blockers, which means you just can't outright replace everybody because it's not a guarantee that you get somebody in who's going to be better pass blockers than what you have. But they're so bad at run blocking right now. I would have to imagine they're one of the worst run blocking teams in all of the NFL at this point. Yeah, right now they rank 29th in the NFL. And when you watch them on film, it looks like age is the reason why they're struggling to run block. Like the concepts they're running, not that different than what they ran before. Sometimes it's different, but I'm gonna be honest with you, the new stuff has worked a lot better than going back to the old stuff. And I just think that like Joe Bitonio, not as effective in space. Wyatt Teller, not as effective in space anymore. Jack Conklin, double knee surgeries, not as effective in space. DeJuan Jones, not great in space. Ethan Pocic, not great in space. That is the difficult balancing act of repairing this offensive line. You want to stay as a solid enough pass blocking unit so you're not just going to go and try to replace these guys with anybody. You really got to invest in your upgrades, and you really got to pick and choose where those upgrades go if you're going to invest in it. So that's why I want to look at the Browns depth chart. I want to look at tackle. I want to look at guard. I want to look at center. We all know who's starting right now for the Browns offensive line, but we have to look at what's in the wings for them. Where have they spent their resources and where do they need more resources sent? So if we look at tackle, they have DeJuan Jones. They have Jack Conklin. We know Jed Wills likely on his way out after this season. James Hudson, maybe you keep him, maybe you don't, but he's not a real big factor here. I think the Browns would be right to spend some resources here. Now, this draft does not seem like a draft where there's going to be a ton of resources to spend at tackle. Doesn't seem like you're going to get a quality tackle in this year's draft in the second round, third round, or first round. So maybe you want to spend that money for tackle on free agency, or you just keep DeJuan, try to develop him as a run blocker, and see what you can get out of Jack Conklin for next year. Now, you can save some money on the cap by cutting Jack Conklin. But I think if you're the Browns, if you don't have a great replacement for Jack Conklin, you cannot afford to let him go because as limited as he is by his age, Jack Conklin right now is legitimately your best run blocker. So, like, you just can't afford to get rid of him right now. You have to hang on to Jack until you get somebody in who can run block well, because Jack's your best run blocker. So for tackle, I recommend free agency, right? If you're going to replace Jack Conklin and cut him, you have to sign somebody sufficient in free agency to replace him. If you can't do that, then you don't cut Jack Conklin. You live with Jack Conklin, and maybe you draft somebody in the later rounds to hopefully develop into a Jack Conklin replacement, knowing that very well could just sign somebody in 2026 as well. But free agency is the route I would go for tackle. Guard. Joe Bitonio, Wyatt Teller. One, we don't know if Joe's going to play after this year. He could retire. If he does retire, Zach Zinter steps into that role. Zach Zinter, coming out of Michigan, was always going to be a project that took a little while, right? His game was predicated on strength. You're going to want to let him develop for a year or two where he can get as strong as he needs to be able to play his style of football. Zach Zinter is so early in his career that it's impossible for me to determine whether this is going well for him or going poorly for him. He looks like a rookie guard. When he's been out there, he's had some moments where he's looked really good. He's had some moments where he looks like a rookie. So that being said, I can't evaluate what Zach Zinter is for the future of the Browns based on what I've seen. So I have to kind of go back to what he was drafted to be. And what Zach Zinter was drafted to be was a road grader, right? A run blocker. That's what he did great at Michigan. That's what he was an All-American for in college. And that's what you hope he develops into in the NFL is a road grader. So if we're looking to up the run blocking from this Cleveland Browns team and getting younger and cheaper on the offensive line, Zach Zinter, he's a huge piece to that, right? So that's one piece that you've invested in. If I'm the Browns, I would consider spending another significant resource, third round or earlier, at the guard position, especially in this draft. You can go and get one of these tackles in this class and move on to guard, and I think you will get a really good guard out this class. I think this class stinks at tackle. I think they're pretty good at guard. Now, again, Senior Bowl is where I really get to figure out about a lot of these offensive line prospects. So maybe my mind changes after the Senior Bowl. But as of right now, my eyes are focused at guard for this team because I think you're going to be able to get a quality guard in the second, first, or third round of this year's draft. And I really think the Browns ought to take the opportunity to go get a swing at guard, maybe even at center. I think the interior of the offensive line could be addressed. If there's one area where you want to go for a complete upgrade, I would recommend center, right? Center or guard, because Joe Bitonio is going to retire soon, whether it be this year, next year, the year after. So you're going to have a clear path to upgrade from him. And Ethan Pocic, you can upgrade from him. Now, you do have Luke Whippler in the wings. You also have Nick Harris, who could be had for cheap to bring in there. So you have some contingency solutions to throw at that problem if you don't get the guy you want at center. And you also have Ethan Pocic, who you could just start again, who wouldn't be the greatest thing in the world, but he's not terrible. I would focus in on the Browns in the draft on guard and center. I understand the instinct for a lot of fans to want to draft a tackle immediately. And look, there might be a tackle available. You might get like Josh Simons or something like that later because he had the ACL injuries. And you can address two things at once. You could get more skilled players. You can get more playmakers on offense. And you can also get more offensive linemen. Like, I think these two things are not opposed to each other. I think you can accomplish them at the same time. The question is, if you're the Cleveland Browns, where do you focus your resources on, given what this draft has? I think you focus your resources on guard and center. Tackle, you see what's available and what you can supplement with the cap gains that you would get from cutting Jack Conklin post June 1st, which is about $15 million. But if you don't find a tackle that you can supplement and bring in that will be an upgrade from Jack Conklin, then you don't do it. And if you're looking for upgrade paths with youth, guard, center. Either Zach Zinter has to take over and be really good. We'll see. He's a third-round pick. He's also in the first year of the program as an offensive lineman. We usually don't judge guys until like year 2, year 3. So Zach Zinter could be a solution there, but also you could spend some serious resources in the second round or with your 2 third-round picks on guys in center and guard that could plug in, be upgrades, or you can spend a second round pick on somebody who could be an instant starter if you need it because Joel retired or because you want to really move on from Ethan Pocic. But that's what the Browns have to focus on, right? If you're looking at offensive linemen, you really want to see how well do these guys run block, because the Browns right now are struggling to run block at a good level this year, and that's been a big problem for him. The pass blocking stuff, most of that was Deshaun Watson. I'm going to be honest with you. Like, it just was. Like, you just look at the splits, it just was. Even with Jameis playing 2 of the top 5 sack teams in the NFL, he has significantly made a difference in the Browns' pass blocking efficiency, and the pressure percentage in just 2 weeks. Right, his sack percentage is significantly lower than Deshaun Watson. It just was that Deshaun Watson was actually bad, like really bad this year. It's a pill that a lot of us have to swallow. Some of us have a harder time taking that pill than others. Is what it is, but that's the truth about where we're at here. Run blocking, though, is the issue, and I think you solve run blocking by taking an advantage of the 2 opportunities you're going to have to replace some guys with Joe Bitonio and Ethan Pocic. So that's where I would focus my resources on if I were Andrew Berry or whoever's going to be the GM during this offseason, because that's where the heart of the Browns' issues are with this offensive line, is in the interior and run blocking. They're just not winning battles there at the rate that you need them to. That's my thoughts. Let me know your thoughts in the comment section down below. You have a great day. Have an even better night. Peace.